And I think it would be very difficult to have anybody stage a strike now when you've got an industry that's, struggling to keep what it's got in terms of market share.
Yeah, especially considering how far they've fallen. I think,
Absolutely. I mean, we were much bigger, the news and Free Press were much bigger, of course, circulation-wise, at the beginning of the strike than they are now. And we lost quite a bit. I mean, I think both sides lost. I mean, the union's positions were weakened, but I think the newspapers also lost and never really recovered fully from it, never got back. Once people lose the habit of reading a newspaper, and of course, that was just the beginning of newspapers online. I think we were one of the first papers to go online in a large part because of the strike. So I think, once people lose that habit of subscribing, plus there were bitter feelings. I mean, it was a union town, a very highly Democratic area. And so, I don't think the papers ever recovered totally either. And then, the other factors that have happened all over the place helped hasten the decline in circulation, certainly.
I'm sure you have plenty of contacts around the country at different papers. Did they respond to the strike at all at the time?
Yeah, it was, from our standpoint, and it's been quite a while, so I'm a little fuzzy on the details, but from our standpoint, within a very short period of time, a big number of the newsroom union members crossed the picket line and came back to work. And so they were not unified. I mean, we had a lot of people cross the line and come back to work, but at the same time, we also brought in, Gannett brought in, at the time the news was owned by Gannett. Gannett brought in, and so did Knight Ridder, employees from other papers around the country, management employees, to help get the papers out. And we then at some point very quickly started hiring to fill vacancies. I mean, we hired big numbers of people in a short period of time to fill those newsroom vacancies. So we were in touch with a lot of people, and that was difficult. I mean, recruiting during a strike, and I was in charge of that for the newsroom for a big chunk of the post-strike period, was very difficult. I mean, you had to, kind of convince people that it was okay to come to work there and that the papers were going to stay in business and that they weren't going to be, and this wasn't always easy to guarantee, that they weren't going to be harassed on picket lines, and that, the mood in the newsroom was actually pretty good eventually. And so that took a lot of time, I think, and a lot of effort. And of course, for a long, long time, there were picket lines. And so, we had to talk to new hires about picket line etiquette, which, most people don't have to do. And so that's kind of tough.
How did the leaders of Detroit react to the strike? Did you work with them at all?
Not me personally, but certainly the publishers did. And I think that there were, a fair number of Detroit leaders, particularly Democrats, who stuck with the unions. That was their constituency. And so, there were hard feelings, I think, on both sides. And I don't think anybody on either side, in terms of, business leaders or Democratic activists, I don't think anybody really wanted to see it happen. And everybody, I think, knew it was not good for the city.
Yeah, especially with Detroit being such a huge union town with the auto industry and the UAW being so strong here.
Right.
Did the UAW or any other unions show support?
Oh, yeah, they definitely did. I mean, as I said, there were several unions involved. In the newsroom, it was the Guild, but of course there were, Teamsters and there were printer unions. There were a lot of different unions involved, and they had a lot of support from other unions, and so, no, most definitely. Um,
Okay. Just one last question. What do you think is the legacy of the strike today?
um, well, I'm not sure. I think that um, from my standpoint, I don't think the unions won anything. In fact, they came back to a contract that did allow for merit increases. I don't really think, and they also lost ground up until the strike. We had a closed shop, so if you were not a manager, you had to belong to the union. Post-strike, we were an open shop, and it was your choice whether or not you wanted to pay union dues. Um, so I don't really think, they lost a lot for and gained nothing, in my view. But at the same time, I think the managers, the management, the company, also lost a lot in terms of um, community support, in terms of, circulation declines, and to some extent advertising support. And so I think, and I think that the one message is that there were no real winners, in my view, um, from the strike. And certainly if I were a labor leader or a publisher, I think would have to think long and hard about, is this worth it? And I do think there were a number of people who thought, there were some stupid decisions made in terms of holding the line and walking out. From a personal standpoint, I think that it really, for me, was an eye-opener in terms of human nature, in that I felt that, there were people who did things on the picket lines that I would never have dreamed of. I think to some extent you get a group together and a kind of mob mentality takes over. And I think that there was some evidence of that. And I think, for me, I tried very hard not to make it personal. Even within days of the strike, I had people who worked for me call me and say, I don't know what to do, union people, should I come back to work? And I would say very much, this is an individual decision that you have to make for yourself. And I would never tell anybody what to do. It's do what's right for you, because every situation's different. And so you make the individual decision. But I also always said, whatever you do as a person, I am going to respect you, and am not, this is not between you and me. This is not personal. And I told everybody who worked for me that, and I felt that way. It was not about, our relationship. And I think that on the other side, not the people who worked for me, but in some other departments, you saw some nastiness that was shocking. And so I was surprised by that.
Yeah, it was definitely friends versus friends sometimes.
Well, in some cases, you had family members who were split. You had husbands who were managers and wives who were non-managers, or uncles and nephews, and there was a lot of real bitterness. There were people who had been to my house and had dinner with me, or I'd been to their houses, that I have never talked to in the years since.
Well, I think some lessons were learned from the strike overall, so even if it was a bad situation, we had a little...
Yeah, it's something I'd never wish on anybody, I'll tell you that.
They are some dark days, but there's a little bit of silver lining, I think.
Hope so. I mean, everything's changed so much now. I mean, what's been happening in the last few years is really, makes the strike look like ancient history in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's like it's a different era, and it's only been 15 years.
I know, and it is totally a different era. I mean, I think that things today would be far different, as evidenced by the concessions made in this last contract.
That's another thing. All these labor talks going on right now,
Right.
and we'll see how those turn out.
Okay, Derek, anything else?
Nope, I think that's it.
Okay, well, good luck with your program. Let me know if you need anything else, and I hope everything works out well for you.
All right, thank you very much, and
All
thanks for your
right,
time.
no problem.
All right, bye.